My boss called me useless. The board called him out. I don't think I'll ever forget the first time my boss Richard called me useless. It wasn't whispered behind closed doors. It wasn't an offhand comment meant to sting in private. No, Richard made sure it was in front of the whole client team. Partners I had worked for weeks to impress. Stakeholders who could make or break the success of our department. He smirked, leaned back in his leather chair and said, "Don't mind Jason. He's basically dead weight on the team." The room went quiet, awkward laughter filling in the silence. My ears burned and my throat tightened. Every word I wanted to say stayed lodged in my chest because I knew contradicting him in front of clients would only confirm the image he was painting of me. So I smiled tightly, forced myself to take notes and swallowed the humiliation. That was Richard's specialty, humiliation. He didn't correct in private, didn't coach, didn't mentor. He cut down, he sneered. He made sure everyone in the room knew where he stood on the hierarchy. Him at the top, the rest of us scrambling for scraps of respect. I went home that night wondering if he was right. Maybe I was useless. Maybe I didn't belong in the boardroom, in corporate strategy, in a company that claimed to pride itself on innovation. But then I opened my laptop, pulled up the analytics from the project I'd been running quietly, and stared at the numbers. Numbers don't lie. Engagement had grown by 38%. Revenue from the pilot test was higher than forecast. Efficiency was up, complaints were down. If I was useless, then why were my projects outperforming his? That's when I decided I wouldn't just survive Richard. I would outlast him. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in enduring quiet sabotage. Richard took credit for ideas I pitched in team meetings, dismissing me when I spoke up and then rephrasing my words 10 minutes later as if they were his own. He reassigned my deliverables, leaving me with scraps of menial work. He CC'd senior executives on emails, highlighting any tiny typo I made as if the fate of the company depended on an extra comma. But I kept records. Every proposal I drafted, every set of numbers I tracked, every client meeting I prepared for. I saved versions of my work with timestamps. I collected threads of emails where I had pitched concepts before Richard miraculously introduced them at his weekly updates. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. The turning point came when I was asked to prepare the quarterly report. Normally Richard hogged that responsibility, eager to be the one presenting glossy slides to the board. But that quarter he was too busy schmoozing with a potential client overseas. He tossed the job my way, saying, "Don't screw this up. Not that you could really add much value anyway." He didn't know that I'd been preparing for this moment for months. I poured myself into that report. I built visuals that made the data sing. I highlighted not only the division-wide results, but also drilled down into individual project performance. It was impossible to miss the fact that Richard's flashy campaigns had bled money, while my side projects had quietly become some of the most profitable in the department. The night before the review, Richard strolled into my office, reeking of expensive cologne, and grabbed the USB drive off my desk. "I'll take it from here," he said casually. My heart dropped. "Wait, that's not final." He waved me off. "Relax. I'll polish it. You don't want to embarrass yourself in front of the board." I sat frozen at my desk long after he left, staring at the empty space where the drive had been. He was going to present my work as his own, again, and this time, with the entire boardroom as his audience. The next morning I walked into the boardroom with shaking hands. Richard was already at the head of the table, confident as ever, laptop connected to the projector. Slides I had stayed up past midnight designing flashed on the screen, only now the author's name had been swapped. My name was gone. His was there. The presentation began. He strutted through the numbers as if he'd been the architect all along. But then something happened that Richard didn't anticipate. The CEO leaned forward, tapping a pen against the table. "Interesting results, Richard. Can you walk us through the specific methodology you used on Project Delta? The one that outperformed projections by nearly 40%. Richard's face twitched. He fumbled with his notes. "Well, it was a team effort. We approached it with..." I clenched my fists under the table. He didn't know. He couldn't explain, because he hadn't touched Project Delta beyond dismissing it as a waste of time. The CEO's gaze sharpened. "Be specific." The silence in the room was deafening. I felt every eye shift toward me, as if everyone knew Richard didn't have the answers. But maybe I did. That's when Richard's voice cracked, and he stammered, "Jason can probably give more details. After all, he was involved." The board turned. My pulse thundered in my ears. This was the moment. The cliff's edge. The place where humiliation could turn to redemption or disaster. I opened my mouth to speak, and the doors of the boardroom swung open. An assistant entered, holding a thick envelope marked confidential. She handed it directly to the CEO, who glanced at Richard with a look I couldn't decipher. The air shifted. The board leaned in. Richard's smirk faltered. Something bigger was happening. "What do you think was inside that confidential envelope? And who do you think it would destroy first, Richard or me?" The envelope hit the table with a soft thud, but it might as well have been thunder. Every head turned as the CEO slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a neatly stacked set of papers. The rustle of sheets echoed in the boardroom like a warning bell. Richard's smirk had already wilted, but now his jaw clenched as though bracing for impact. The CEO didn't look at him. Instead, he adjusted his glasses and scanned the first page, his brow furrowing. Then his lips pressed into a thin, hard line. Finally, he glanced up. Not at Richard, not at me, but at the entire board. "It seems," he said slowly, "that we have some discrepancies to review." Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Discrepancies? I'm sure it's nothing. Probably just some." The CEO raised a hand to silence him. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "According to these emails, Several projects, specifically Project Delta and Omega, were attributed to Richard's leadership, but the time-stamped attachments suggest otherwise. The originating author of the concepts, drafts, and proposals was Jason. The boardroom froze. My name had never carried weight in that room until now. To hear it spoken by the CEO himself, attached to the work I had poured my heart into, felt surreal. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something dangerously close to vindication. Richard laughed nervously, a high-pitched chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. Jason's a part of the team, sure, but leadership, execution, that's all me. Anyone can draft a few slides, but real strategy, enough. The CEO's voice cut like glass. He slapped the papers down on the table, the sound sharp, final. We have full email threads here, from Jason to you. Outlines, supporting research, even diagrams. Your replies are nothing but vague affirmations and one-liners. In some cases, you didn't even reply at all until after the project was already underway. A board member, an older woman known for her no-nonsense attitude, leaned forward. Richard, you presented these as if you were the architect. That is intellectual theft. It undermines not only Jason's work, but the integrity of this entire board. The color drained from Richard's face. He looked around for support, but the eyes that once nodded to his every word now bore into him with suspicion. Desperation bled into his tone. This is being blown out of proportion. It's common for managers to present their team's work. Everyone knows that. Yes, another board member interjected sharply, but managers credit their team. They don't erase them. He flipped through the documents with visible disgust. You crossed a line. Richard's hands shook as he tried to adjust his tie. Sweat pooled at his temples, and for the first time since I'd known him he looked small, cornered. But instead of backing down, he lashed out. You think Jason could have pulled this off without me? He's nothing. He's a glorified intern who can't speak up without stuttering. You're all chasing shadows. Something inside me snapped. I had swallowed enough humiliation to last a lifetime. I pushed my chair back and stood. My legs trembled, but my voice didn't. I'm not nothing. Those projects exist because I believed in them when you told me they were worthless. I stayed up nights refining them while you were out at client dinners. I built them piece by piece, even when you tried to shut me down. If I'm nothing, then how come my numbers outperformed yours every single time? Silence. The words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. The CEO leaned back, folding his arms. Jason, can you walk us through Project Delta, from conception to execution? This was it. The moment Richard had tried to rob me of, the moment I had feared I'd never get. I swallowed, opened my laptop, and pulled up the original files. My fingers steadied as I clicked through the slides, explaining methodology, test markets, analytics, and results. The more I spoke, the more the board leaned in. Their nods weren't polite this time. They were engaged, impressed. Halfway through, one of the senior members interrupted me. These visuals are excellent. Who designed them? I did, I answered, glancing briefly at Richard. His eyes darted downward, unable to meet mine. When I finished, the room erupted in murmurs of approval. The CEO tapped his pen against the table. Impressive. Very impressive. Then his gaze shifted back to Richard. Do you have anything to add? Richard stammered. I oversaw. His voice faltered. I mean, I guided the direction. No, the CEO said firmly. You obstructed it. The board members exchanged looks. One by one, heads nodded. The verdict was unspoken, but unanimous. The CEO closed the folder with finality. Richard, you've not only misrepresented yourself to this board, but also undermined the very people who keep this company innovative. Your leadership is no longer tenable. Richard's eyes went wide. Wait, you can't. Effective immediately. You are relieved of your duties. Security will escort you from the building. The room exhaled collectively. Some board members shook their heads. Others scribbled notes, but all eyes returned to me. Richard sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Then, in a sudden burst of defiance, he stood, pointing a finger at me. This isn't over. You think you've won? You'll crumble without me. The security team entered. 2 tall men in suits. They flanked him as he sputtered, protested, begged. The sight of him being let out, once so powerful, now stripped of dignity, was something I never imagined I'd witness. But it happened, and the echo of his footsteps faded like a ghost leaving the room. I sat back down, pulse hammering in my ears. The CEO turned toward me, his tone softer now. Jason, thank you for your composure. It's clear your contributions have been underappreciated. That changes today. I blinked. Sir, you've demonstrated not only creativity, but also resilience under pressure. Qualities this company needs. As of now, you'll be taking over as interim head of the division. We'll formalize the details soon. The words barely registered. Interim head. Me. For the first time in months, maybe years, I allowed myself to breathe fully. I wasn't useless. I wasn't invisible. I was exactly where I belonged. But as the meeting wrapped, and board members filed out with congratulatory nods, I caught a final glimpse of Richard through the glass doors. He stood in the lobby, red-faced, yelling into his phone as security blocked him from re-entering. His empire had crumbled in a single morning, and it wasn't me who destroyed him. It was his own arrogance. Walking back to my desk, past the whispers of colleagues who had watched Richard's downfall unfold, I realized something. Power doesn't lie in cruelty. It lies in truth, in persistence, in refusing to let someone else define your worth. Richard had tried to define mine as useless, but the board, the numbers, the proof, defined me as something else entirely. Valuable, resilient, deserving. I sat at my desk, logged in and opened a fresh document. My first task as interim head was staring at me, designing a future where people like Richard couldn't thrive. A future where no one would ever be humiliated into silence again. The irony. Richard had given me that purpose by trying to destroy me. And now he was gone, and I was still here, stronger, and maybe just maybe a little grateful. Because sometimes, the worst thing someone calls you can end up being the reason you prove them wrong. Tell me in the comment, if your boss tried to erase your work, would you fight quietly with proof, or call them out loud in front of everyone? I would see your response.